My name is Holly Dixon. I'm 32 years old, and for 31 of those years, I believed that if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, stayed quiet enough, my family would eventually love me the way they loved my sister. I was wrong, but I didn't find that out the easy way. On the night of my birthday, I walked into my parents' house expecting balloons, maybe a cake. Maybe, if I let myself hope just a little, an actual apology for years of being treated like an afterthought. Instead, I walked into a room with 200 folding chairs arranged like pews in a courtroom, 200 relatives and neighbors and near strangers turned in their seats to stare at me, and a table at the front where my father stood, holding a microphone like he was about to deliver a eulogy. He was, just not the kind I expected. By the end of that night, my mother would rip my childhood photographs off the family wall one by one in front of everyone I had ever known. My father would read aloud an itemized bill, $400,000, he said, for the waste of raising me. And my sister, Megan, the golden child of the Dixon family since the day she was born, would reach into my purse, pull my car keys from my hand, and tell me with a smile that our father had already signed the title over to her. I walked out of that house without saying a single word. 4 days later, my phone rang 80 times. I didn't answer once. If you've ever been the child in your family who worked twice as hard for half the love, stay with me. This story is for you. And if this resonates with you even a little, hit that like button right now. Not because I'm asking for a favor, but because somewhere out there, someone else needs to know they're not the only one who's lived this. To understand what happened on my birthday, you have to understand what it was like growing up in the Dixon house. There were two kinds of children in my family, Megan and everyone else. I was everyone else. My father, Richard Dixon, built a real estate empire from a single run-down duplex he bought in his 20s. By the time I was a teenager, he owned half the commercial real estate on the east side of our town. He measured everything, success, love, worth, in numbers, square footage, profit margins, return on investment. I think in his mind, children were just another asset class, and somewhere along the way, he'd decided Megan was going to appreciate in value, while I was a write-off. My mother, Patricia, had been an elementary school teacher before she married him. She gave that up for dinner parties, charity boards, and a decades-long project of making sure everyone in town believed the Dixons were the picture-perfect family. Appearances were her currency, and I was never quite polished enough to be useful to her image. Then there was Megan, 4 years younger than me, effortlessly pretty, and utterly certain of her place at the center of the universe. I don't think Megan ever did anything to earn the favoritism she got. She was simply born into it, the way some people are born into money, and once she had it, she never had to share it. I remember standing on a stage at 16 years old, having just been awarded a full academic scholarship into a pre-med program most kids twice my age couldn't get into. I scanned the auditorium from my parents' faces. They weren't there. Megan had a ballet recital that same afternoon, and as my mother explained it to me later, without even looking at her phone, that was more important, Holly. When I graduated from nursing school at 22, at the top of my class, my mother's only comment was a long sigh. "If only you'd studied business like Megan," she said. "Your father would finally have someone to take over the company." It didn't seem to matter to her that Megan had dropped out of that same business program 2 years earlier. It didn't matter that I was pulling 12-hour shifts in the ICU, saving actual human lives, while Megan was maxing out credit cards on handbags and vacations she couldn't afford. In my parents' eyes, Megan could do no wrong, and I could do nothing right. "My beautiful youngest daughter," my mother would coo at dinner parties, running her fingers through Megan's hair like she was a prize show dog. Then, almost as an afterthought, she'd glance my way. "Holly, can't you learn something from your sister?" I learned plenty. I learned to shrink myself at the dinner table so I wouldn't take up too much space. I learned to keep my accomplishments quiet so they wouldn't seem like I was competing with Megan's mediocrity. I learned that in my family, love came with conditions I would never quite meet, no matter how hard I tried. But there was one person who never made me feel that way. One person who saw me, really saw me, long before anyone else did. My grandmother, Eleanor Mitchell, was my father's mother, and she was the only person in that family who ever made me feel like I belonged simply by existing. When I told her at 17 that I wanted to become a nurse instead of joining my father's real estate company, she took both of my hands in hers. Her grip was warm and steady, the kind of grip that told you everything about a person's character before they said a single word. "Taking care of people is the most noble work there is, sweetheart. Don't you let anyone tell you otherwise," she told me. 3 years ago, Grandma Eleanor was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The doctors gave her 18 months, maybe 2 years if she was lucky. My parents' first instinct was to talk about hiring a full-time caregiver, someone they could pay to handle the inconvenient parts of dying, so they wouldn't have to. Megan's suggestion was even colder, a nursing home. She said, "It would just be easier." She said this, filing her nails while she said it, like she was talking about returning a piece of furniture rather than deciding the fate of the woman who had rocked her to sleep as a baby. I quit my job that week. I moved into Grandma Eleanor's little house on the edge of town and spent the next 3 years measuring out her medications, holding her hand through the nights when the pain was too much for sleep, and reading to her from the paperback mysteries she loved when she couldn't hold the book anymore herself. In 3 years, Megan visited twice. My parents came once a month, stayed for 30 minutes, and always had somewhere else to be. Traffic, a dinner reservation, an open house they couldn't miss. But Grandma Eleanor and I had something real. She told me stories about my grandfather, about the dreams she'd had as a young woman before life narrowed her choices down to the ones that were left. She taught me in 100 small moments over 3 years that real strength isn't about fighting the loudest. It's about knowing your own worth, especially when the people who are supposed to remind you of it have forgotten. She passed away 6 months ago, quietly in her sleep, with my hand in hers. At the funeral, while I was still raw with grief, my mother pulled me aside. "Don't act like you sacrificed so much," she said, straightening her black dress. "It's not like she left you anything." I didn't respond. I didn't yet know how wrong she was. Grandma Eleanor had prepared something my family was already circling like vultures, long before they even knew what it was. If a story like this, the ache of being the overlooked child, the quiet strength of finding one person who truly sees you, means something to you, go ahead and subscribe now. There's more where this came from, and I promise you it's worth staying for. The first sign that something was wrong exactly 1 week before my birthday. I was finishing a double shift at the hospital when my phone buzzed in the break room. Megan's name lit up the screen. She never called me, not for birthdays, not for holidays, not for anything. "Holly?" she asked. Her voice was strange when I picked up. Too sweet, like she was performing warmth she didn't actually feel. "Have you gotten any mail from a lawyer lately? Something about Grandma's estate?" I frowned at the break room wall. "No? Why?" "Just curious." A pause was just a beat too long. "Listen, I've been talking to Mom and Dad. We want to throw you a surprise birthday party, the whole family." I almost dropped my coffee. In 32 years, my family had never once thrown me a birthday party. Not a single one. "A party for me?" "We want to make things right, Holly," she said. After everything with Grandma, we've been distant. It's time to fix that." Something flickered in my chest. Hope, maybe. The desperate, foolish kind that never quite dies no matter how many times it's been disappointed. My coworker Danny found me still staring at my phone 10 minutes later. Danny had been my best friend since nursing school, the brother I never had in every way that mattered except blood. When I told him about the call, his expression darkened immediately. "Holly," he set down his clipboard. "They've never thrown you a birthday party in your entire life. Why start now?" "Maybe they feel guilty about Grandma." "People don't change overnight," he said. "They just get better at hiding their intentions." I waved him off, told him he was being paranoid. But that night, lying awake in bed, I couldn't shake the strange emphasis in Megan's voice, or the question about the lawyer's letter that had come completely out of nowhere. Why would she ask about that? I told myself it was nothing, that maybe, finally, after everything, my family actually wanted to be a family. I had no idea what was really waiting for me. 3 days before the party, I ran into my Aunt Ruth at the grocery store. Ruth was my mother's younger sister, the black sheep, according to my parents, because she talked too much and didn't know her place. In other words, she told the truth, and my mother couldn't stand her for it. "Holly," she grabbed my arm in the produce aisle, glancing around like we were being watched. "Do you know about Megan?" My stomach tightened. "Know what?" She pulled me behind a display of watermelons, dropping her voice to a whisper. "She's in trouble. Bad trouble. She and Kyle invested everything in some cryptocurrency scheme a friend of his recommended. They lost almost $200,000. They're drowning in debt, to the bank, to friends, to everyone." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "Does Dad know?" "She's frantic. He's been trying to find money anywhere he can to bail her out." Her grip tightened on my arm. "I shouldn't be telling you this, Holly, but you deserve to know. Your family isn't planning a birthday party. They're planning something else." The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright, the cheerful store music too loud. "What do you mean, something else?" Ruth's eyes met mine, and there was pity in them, and fear. "I don't know exactly, but they've been meeting, all 3 of them, talking about Grandma's estate, about some house." She released my arm. "Be careful, Holly, please." She was gone before I could ask anything else, disappearing around the corner like she'd never been there at all. I stood alone among the watermelons, my heart pounding. What did any of this have to do with me? That night, I checked my mailbox for the first time in 2 weeks. Working night shifts meant I often forgot about the physical mailbox. Bills were on autopay, everything important came through email. But Ruth's words were still echoing in my head. A lawyer, Grandma's estate, some house. Buried beneath credit card offers and grocery store flyers was a single cream-colored envelope heavier than the rest. In the corner, Law Offices of Gerald Whitmore. I tore it open on my front steps, reading by the glow of my phone. "Dear Miss Dixon, we respectfully request your presence at our offices to discuss matters pertaining to the estate of Eleanor Mitchell. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to schedule an appointment." My grandmother's house, the little place where I'd spent 3 years caring for her. I'd assumed it would go to my mother or be divided among the whole family. That's how these things worked, wasn't it? But this letter was addressed only to me. I dialed the number with shaking fingers. A receptionist answered on the 3rd ring, and after a brief hold, offered me an appointment the day after my birthday. I hung up and sat in the darkness of my apartment for a long time, turning the envelope over and over in my hands. Megan had asked about a lawyer's letter. My parents were meeting to discuss Grandma's estate, and now this. The pieces were there, but I couldn't quite make them fit together. I decided to go to the party anyway. Whatever was happening, I needed to see it for myself, but I wouldn't walk in blind, not this time. I pulled up to my parents' house wearing a navy blue dress, Grandma Eleanor's favorite color. The driveway was packed. Cars lined both sides of the street and spilled onto the neighbor's lawn, far more vehicles than I'd ever have expected for a simple family birthday party. That was my first real warning. I texted Danny before getting out of the car. "I'm here. Something feels off." "Stay close to your phone," he replied instantly. "I'm parked 2 blocks away, just in case." Good old Danny, always prepared for the worst, even when I wasn't ready to admit the worst was possible. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside and froze. The living room had been completely transformed. Rows of folding chairs stretched across the space, easily 200 of them, all facing a long table at the far end. It looked like a courtroom. It looked like a trial. Every single chair was occupied. I recognized faces from my childhood. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years, my parents' business partners, neighbors from our old street, even people whose names I couldn't place. People who must have been invited simply to fill seats and bear witness. There was no cake, no balloons, no streamers, just 200 pairs of eyes, all turning at once to stare at me. Megan appeared at my elbow, her smile stretched too wide, too bright to be real. "You made it. Everyone's waiting." Waiting for what? My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You'll see." She took my arm and steered me forward. "Just go stand by the table." "Where's the cake, Megan? What is this?" She didn't answer. She just kept walking, her manicured nails digging into my sleeve, guiding me through a crowd that parted for us in total silence. No one said happy birthday, no one smiled, and then I was standing alone in front of that long table, 200 faces staring at me without a single sound. My father rose from his chair. He lifted a microphone, the kind they use at weddings for the best man's toast, and his voice echoed through the transformed living room. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight, our family needs to address an important matter." I scanned the crowd and found Aunt Ruth in the back corner, her face pale with dread. She already knew what was coming. I didn't, yet. "For 32 years," he continued, turning to face me directly, "your mother and I raised you, fed you, clothed you, paid for your education, gave you everything." "Dad," my throat had gone completely dry. "What's going on?" "Be quiet, I'm not finished." The room was absolutely silent. 200 people, and not one of them seemed to even be breathing. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick stack of papers, holding them up like evidence at a trial. "This is a detailed accounting. Every dollar we spent on you from the day you were born until you moved out. Food, medical bills, school supplies, birthday presents, everything." He flipped to the last page, running his finger down to the bottom line. "The total comes to $400,000. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shocked whispers. Somewhere, someone coughed. $400,000, my father repeated, his eyes locked on mine, "that we wasted on a daughter who turned her back on this family." I didn't turn my back on anyone. "You have 2 choices, Holly. Pay back every cent or sign away your claim to your grandmother's house." My blood went cold. "My claim to what?" "Don't play dumb. The lawyer sent you a letter." "I haven't even read it yet." "Doesn't matter." He slid a document across the table towards me. "Sign this, give up the house, and we'll forget all about this bill." That's when my mother stood up. She walked toward the family photo wall, the same wall I'd grown up staring at every day of my childhood. Generations of Dixons captured in gilded frames. My grandparents' wedding, my parents' honeymoon, Megan's ballet recital, my graduation, decades of holidays and birthdays stretching back through the years. My mother reached up and pulled down the first photograph, me at 5 years old, gap-toothed and grinning at the camera. 32 years, she said, her voice trembling with what I now recognize as manufactured grief. 32 years of raising an ungrateful child. She ripped the photo in half. The sound cracked through the silent room like a gunshot. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. She grabbed another frame, my high school graduation. A daughter who only thinks of herself. RIP. My nursing school diploma photo, who never appreciated anything we gave her. RIP. Then she reached for the photograph that made my heart actually stop. Me and Grandma Eleanor, taken the week before she died, both of us smiling, her hand wrapped in mine. A daughter who manipulated a dying old woman. RIP. The pieces fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. 200 people watched in complete silence. Not one of them moved, not one of them objected. Then Megan was there again, reaching into my purse. She pulled out my car keys with a triumphant little smile, dangling them in front of my face. Oh, and this? Dad already transferred the title to me. I need it more than you do. I looked at my mother, standing there, surrounded by the torn fragments of my entire existence. At my father, his hand still resting on that stack of fabricated debt. At my sister, my own keys clenched victoriously in her fist. At 200 relatives who had watched my family try to erase me in real time and done absolutely nothing. I could have cried, I could have begged. I did neither. I took one breath, then another. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my grandmother's voice, clear as if she were standing right beside me. You are enough, Holly. You always were. I looked at my father, really looked at him, at the desperation underneath his anger, at the way his hands trembled just slightly against that stack of paper. Dad, I said, my voice calmer than I felt, have you actually read Grandma's will? He blinked. What? Her will, the legal document. Have you read it yourself? I don't need to read it. The house was supposed to go to the family. You're sure about that? Something flickered across his face. Doubt, maybe, or fear. You're asking me to sign away rights you haven't even verified. That's not how legal documents work. From the back of the room, Aunt Ruth gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. I turned to Megan. How much do you owe exactly? Her face went white. What? I think you do. Whispers erupted through the crowd, confused glances, people shifting uncomfortably in their folding chairs. My mother stepped forward. This isn't about Megan. It's about you being selfish. No, I held up my hand. This is about you trying to take something that might not even be yours without bothering to check first. Silence. I looked at the torn photographs scattered at my mother's feet, at the car keys still clutched in Megan's fist, at my father's carefully typed accounting of everything I had supposedly cost him. Then I looked at the door. I won't sign anything tonight, and I certainly won't sign anything under duress in front of 200 people. My father slammed his palm against the table. Sign the paper, Holly, or you're no longer a Dixon. I stood still for a long moment, looking out at those 200 faces staring back at me, some curious, some pitying, most simply waiting to see what would happen next. This was their entertainment for the evening, my humiliation served up like dinner theater. I reached up and touched the bracelet on my wrist, my grandmother's bracelet, the one she'd given me the day before she died. Slowly, deliberately, I unclasped it and slipped it into my pocket, close to my heart. They didn't deserve to see it. I will not sign anything tonight, and I will not make legal decisions while being publicly ambushed, and I will not stand here and let you erase me. My mother's face contorted. How dare you? I cut her off. You tore my photos off the wall. Dad demanded payment for raising me. Megan took my car. I have nothing left to lose here. I turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one reached out. No one said wait or happy birthday or I'm sorry. 200 people, and not a single one of them spoke. If you're watching this and you've ever had to walk out of a room full of people who were supposed to love you and didn't, I want you to know something. Walking away isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do. Drop a like if you agree, because what happens next is going to make it very, very clear who was really in control that night. Danny's car was waiting at the end of the block, exactly like he'd promised. I climbed into the passenger seat without looking back. "You okay?" His voice was gentle. "No." I stared straight ahead. "But I will be." He pulled away from the curb and my parents' house shrank in the rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. I didn't know it then, but walking out that door was the best decision I ever made. It just took 4 days for my family to fully understand what they'd done. Danny dropped me at my apartment and stayed on the couch that night. Neither of us slept much. By morning, my phone had exploded. 47 missed calls from my father, 33 from my mother, 21 increasingly frantic texts from Megan. "Call me back. It's urgent." The extended relatives were even worse. "How could you treat your parents like that? Your grandmother would be ashamed. Selfish. Always knew you were selfish." I turned my phone off and set it face down on the kitchen counter. Danny made coffee, strong and black, the way I liked it after long shifts. He didn't ask questions. He just sat with me in the quiet. "They only know one side of the story," he finally said, "and they don't want to know the other side." That afternoon, I pulled out the memory box my grandmother had given me in her final weeks, filled with letters, photographs, and small treasures from a lifetime I only partly knew. At the bottom, I found an envelope I'd never opened, my name written in her familiar, shaky handwriting. Inside was a single page, her final letter to me. "My dearest Holly," it began, "by now you've probably discovered that things aren't going the way your parents expected. Don't worry, sweetheart. I've taken care of everything. They will try to take what I've left you. Don't let them. Mr. Whitmore knows everything. Trust him." I read those words 3 times. She knew. Even before she died, she had known exactly what my family would try to do, and she'd already prepared for it. "I think I need to see that lawyer," I told Danny, the letter trembling in my hands. The next morning, I walked into Gerald Whitmore's office. He was older than I'd expected, silver-haired, kind-eyed, with the patient demeanor of a man who'd witnessed every possible family drama a small town could produce. His office smelled like old books and furniture polish. "Mr. Dixon," he stood to shake my hand, "I've been waiting for you." "You know what happened?" "Your grandmother predicted it, almost word for word." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." He pulled a document from his drawer, heavy paper, official seals, notarized signatures. The will. "Your grandmother left your house to you, Holly, not to the family, not to be divided, to you and you alone." The words didn't make sense at first. "Just me? Why?" "Because you were the only one that was there." His voice softened. 3 years, Miss Dixon. You gave up your career, your apartment, your entire life to care for her. No one else even visited more than a handful of times." I stared at the document, at my grandmother's familiar signature at the bottom. "The house is valued at approximately $650,000. It's yours, free and clear. No one can take it from you." "But my father said—" "Your father assumed," he leaned back in his chair, "he assumed your grandmother would divide everything equally, the way most families do. She didn't. She knew exactly who deserved it." He paused. "There's one more thing, a condition your grandmother included." My heart pounded. "What kind of condition?" "If any family member attempts to coerce or threaten you to surrender your inheritance, they forfeit any claim to her remaining assets entirely." He smiled just slightly. "Your grandmother was a very smart woman." Then the office door opened behind me. I turned to find Aunt Ruth standing in the doorway, her expression soft, sad, and somehow deeply relieved all at once. "Hello, sweetheart." "Aunt Ruth?" I half rose from my chair. "What are you doing here?" "Your grandmother asked me to be here when the time came." She crossed the room and sat beside me. Whitmore nodded. "Mrs. Mitchell served as a witness when Eleanor drafted this will. She was present for every decision that went into it." "You knew this all along?" "I knew." Ruth took my hand. "Your grandmother called me 3 years ago, right after you moved in with her. She said, 'Patricia will never accept this. Holly will need someone in her corner.'" My eyes burned. "Why didn't you tell me?" She made me promise not to. She wanted you to know her love was unconditional, not that you were expecting an inheritance. Ruth squeezed my fingers. She said you were the only one who loved her for herself, not for what she could give you. The rest of the family, Whitmore added, was informed the will existed but never told its contents. They assumed they knew what was in it. They were wrong. I thought of my mother tearing photos off the wall, my father's $400,000 bill, Megan's triumphant smile as she snatched my keys. All of it built on an assumption, a lie they had told themselves so thoroughly they believed it. Your grandmother's last wish, Ruth said, her voice breaking, was for you to know that you are enough, Holly. You always were. You never needed anyone's permission to matter. I cried then, for the first time since that terrible birthday. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of relief. By the second day, the calls had turned desperate. I turned my phone back on just long enough to count. 62 missed calls from my father, 48 from my mother, and one very long voicemail from Megan, her voice cracking with something that might have been panic or might have been rage. Holly, the lawyer called us back. There's been some kind of mistake. You need to call me right now. I played it to Danny while we sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee that had long since gone cold. Mistake, he snorted. That's what they're calling it now. The texts were even more revealing. From my father, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. From my mother, Holly, please, this isn't what we wanted. From Megan, the lawyer says you're the only heir. That can't be right. Call me. I showed Danny the screen. Funny how misunderstanding is their favorite word the moment things stop going their way. They were perfectly clear 2 nights ago, he said. There was no misunderstanding then. My phone buzzed again. Another message from my father. We're family, Holly. Don't let some legal document come between us. I read it twice, then laughed. A hollow, broken sound. Legal documents didn't come between us, Dad, I said to the empty screen. You did, when you read that bill in front of 200 people. On the third day, they came to my door. I was alone that time. Danny had gone back to his own apartment 2 floors up. I heard 3 sharp knocks and checked the peephole. My father, my mother, Megan, all 3 of them standing in my hallway like a delegation. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Holly, my father's voice had changed, softer now, almost pleading. We need to talk. So talk. My mother wrung her hands. Sweetheart, the other night I got carried away. I was upset. You tore my photos off the wall, Mom, in front of 200 people. I didn't mean... You called me ungrateful while you ripped up my graduation picture. Was that an accident too? Silence. Megan pushed forward. Holly, listen, I'm in real trouble. If I can't come up with the money, then you'll face the consequences of your own choices. That's not my problem to solve. My father straightened, trying to regain some control. That house should belong to the whole family. Your grandmother would have wanted... Grandmother wanted me to have it, I said, my voice steady. That's why she put my name on the will, not yours. You're being selfish. You demanded $400,000 for the crime of me being born. You watched your other daughter steal my car. I paused. And now you want me to pretend we're family. We're family. That's not how this works. My father's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe, or rage. I have to take this. He answered without stepping away. Barbara, now isn't a... I could hear her voice through the speaker, loud and furious. Richard, I just got off the phone with Gerald Whitmore. My father's jaw tightened. He says Holly is the sole beneficiary, that Eleanor left her everything. Is that true? It's complicated. And she mentioned something else, something about a coercion clause. If anyone tries to force Holly to give up her inheritance, they lose their own claims entirely. My mother's, no, Barbara, my father's own sister, sand hand, shook as she delivered the final blow. Richard, tell me you didn't publicly disown your own daughter over a house that was never yours to begin with. That's not what happened. I was there. I watched Patricia tear those photographs. I watched you read that ridiculous bill. 200 people saw exactly what you did, Richard, and now everyone knows the truth. Barbara, please. The whole family is talking. You tried to humiliate your own daughter into giving up a legal inheritance, and you didn't even bother to check whether you had any claim to it at all. My mother's, no, Barbara, my father's own sister, hand shook as she delivered the final blow. No one is on your side, not after this. She hung up. The four of us stood frozen in my doorway. My mother had gone pale. Megan looked like she might cry. My father stared at his phone as if it personally betrayed him. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I think I should leave now, I said quietly. If you've ever watched someone finally face the consequences of what they thought they'd get away with, you know exactly the feeling I had standing in that doorway. Hit subscribe if you want to see exactly how the rest of this story plays out, because it only gets more satisfying from here. On the fourth day, I returned to Mr. Whitmore's office. Sunlight streamed through his windows, catching dust motes drifting lazily in the air. Everything felt calmer now, clearer. I've made my decision, I said, settling into the leather chair. I want to keep the house. I don't want to sell it. Whitmore nodded, pulling out a fresh stack of documents. What would you like to do with it? Grandmother always said she wanted it to be a peaceful place, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. I paused, remembering our long conversations on her porch. I'll keep it exactly as she left it, live in it, take care of it. A fitting tribute. I signed the ownership transfer papers with a steady hand. Each signature felt like a small victory. There's one more matter, Whitmore said, sliding another document across the desk. Regarding the vehicle. I'd almost forgotten. The car Megan had taken. Your father had no legal authority to transfer the title. The vehicle was registered in your name, purchased with your own funds. The transfer was invalid from the start. What does that mean? It means we can file a complaint and have the registration corrected. He leaned back. Get your car back. For the first time in days, I almost smiled. Let's do that. As I signed the last document, I looked up. Mr. Whitmore, did my grandmother ever say anything about my family before she died? He was quiet for a moment. She said, they won't understand, but Holly will, and that's enough. My eyes stung. She really knew them, didn't she? She knew all of you, he smiled gently. That's why she made the choices she did. I left his office with the deed in my hands and a strange, quiet peace settling into my chest. The hard part was over. The healing was just beginning. Within a week, the fallout had spread far beyond my doorway. The 200 people who had watched my public humiliation started talking and talking. News travels fast in families. It travels even faster when there's scandal attached. I heard it all from Aunt Ruth, who called me every few days now. Your parents' friends are distancing themselves, Holly, she told me over the phone. The Hendersons canceled their standing dinner date. The Watsons stopped returning calls. I didn't ask for that. You didn't have to. People saw what they did, Holly. They drew their own conclusions. Worse news came from the business world. My father's real estate company depended entirely on reputation, on trust, on the carefully curated image of a solid family man making solid deals. One of his biggest clients, a longtime developer he'd worked with for 15 years, pulled out of a $50,000 contract without warning. I heard what happened at your daughter's birthday party, the man reportedly told him. I don't do business with people who treat family that way. My mother's social circles crumbled just as fast. She'd sat on the same charity board for 20 years. They quietly removed her from the committee. We need members who align with our values, the chair told her. I didn't feel triumphant hearing any of it, just tired and sad. They did this to themselves, Danny said when I told him. You didn't post anything online, you didn't tell anyone. They were the ones who invited 200 witnesses. He was right. The truth has a way of speaking for itself. I didn't need to say a single word. My silence was louder than anything I could have shouted. But while my parents dealt with their social consequences, Megan was facing something far worse. A month later, Aunt Ruth brought me the news while we sat on my apartment balcony, drinking tea in the autumn sunlight. Ruth had become a regular presence in my life by then, the family connection I'd always secretly wished I'd had. Megan had to sell her house, Ruth said quietly. I set down my cup. Sell it? She and Kyle couldn't make the payments anymore. The crypto debt finally caught up with them. Ruth sighed. They've moved back in with your parents. I tried to feel some kind of satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I just felt hollow. Your mother blames everyone but herself, of course. The economy, the market, you, mostly. If only Holly had shared the inheritance, none of this would have happened. She mimicked my mother's voice with a bitter kind of accuracy. That's the story she tells anyone who will listen. The inheritance wouldn't have covered Megan's debts anyway. I know that. You know that. Patricia will never admit it. I watched a bird land on the balcony railing. Grandmother loved birds. She used to leave seed out for them every single morning. Do you regret it? Any of it? I thought carefully before answering. I regret that they never saw me as part of the family, that nothing I did was ever enough. I paused. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Not anymore. Ruth reached over and squeezed my hand. Eleanor would be so proud of you. I hope so. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower over the trees. Megan's debt was never my responsibility, but somehow my family had spent years making me feel like it was. For 32 years, I'd carried a guilt that never belonged to me in the first place. Not anymore. 2 weeks later, I got my car back. The legal process turned out to be surprisingly simple. Mr. Whittemore filed the paperwork proving the title transfer had never been valid. The vehicle had been registered in my name, purchased entirely with my own money. My father never had the authority to give it to anyone. A police officer accompanied me to my parents' house to retrieve it. I dreaded that moment for days. Another confrontation, another scene. But when we pulled up, the house looked smaller somehow, less imposing than it used to be. Megan met us at the door. Her face was drawn, tired, like she'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. She held out my keys without a single word. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Shame, maybe? Or regret. Then her expression hardened again, and she turned away, disappearing back into the house without another word. I didn't see my parents. I didn't want to. As I walked back to my car, a voice called out behind me. "Holly." I turned. Aunt Ruth stood on the front steps, having slipped out through the side door. "Are you okay?" I looked at the house where I'd grown up, the windows I used to stare out of, dreaming of something more, the front yard where I'd played alone while Megan had friends over. "I'm learning how to be okay," I said honestly. Ruth smiled, her eyes glistening. "That's enough." I climbed into my car, and started the engine. The familiar hum settled something deep in my chest. Getting the car back wasn't really about the car at all. It was about taking back what was mine, including my dignity. I pulled out of that driveway for the last time, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror. I didn't look back. 1 month later, I moved into grandmother Eleanor's house. The little place on the edge of town felt different now, quieter, more mine. I spent the first week cleaning, organizing, letting her presence settle around me like a warm blanket. I kept her favorite chair by the window, her tea set in the kitchen, the bird feeder she'd filled faithfully every single morning for 40 years. Some things I changed: fresh paint in the bedroom, new curtains in the living room, small touches that made the space feel like both of us together rather than just her memory alone. Once I was settled, I sent one final message to my parents. It took me 3 hours to write. "I don't hate any of you, but I can't continue being treated like I don't exist. You disowned me publicly. You demanded payment for raising me. You stood by while my photos were torn off the wall. These aren't things I can simply forget. If there ever comes a day when you want a real relationship, not based on money, not based on obligation, but on genuine care, you know how to reach me. Until then, I need distance. Please respect that. I hit send and turned off my phone. No one replied. I wasn't surprised. Part of me was even relieved. In the weeks that followed, I built a new life. Danny came over every Saturday for dinner. Aunt Ruth visited on Sunday afternoons. My coworkers from the hospital became closer friends than I'd ever let anyone be before. I wasn't alone. I had family. They just weren't related to me by blood. And somehow that made them more precious, not less. I stood on grandmother's porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. I'm figuring it out, Grandma, just like you said I would. What she really left me. 3 months later, I sat on grandmother's porch with her last letter in my hands. The paper had grown soft from all the times I'd read it. The ink was starting to fade in places, but those final words still hit me exactly like the first time. Live like you deserve to, sweetheart. For 32 years, I'd waited for my family to see me, to value me, to love me the way I loved them. I shrunk myself to fit their expectations, silenced my own voice to keep their peace, given up small pieces of my soul every single time I let their cruelty slide. It took being publicly disowned on my own birthday in front of 200 people for me to finally understand something I should have known all along. I never needed their permission to matter. Grandmother knew that. She'd always known it. That's why she left me the house, not because of the money or the property or any material value it carried, but because she wanted me to have proof, physical, undeniable proof, that someone in my family had seen me all along. I wasn't the ungrateful daughter they'd painted me as. I wasn't the burden, the disappointment, the failure. I was the one who showed up, the one who stayed, the one who loved without conditions. And that was enough. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in colors grandmother would have loved. Somewhere in the trees, a bird was singing. I miss you, Grandma, I said to the empty chair beside me, every single day. The breeze picked up, rustling through the leaves like a whisper, like an answer. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my heart. Thank you, I whispered, for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me permission to choose myself. After all, that's what she really left me. Not a house, permission. That's my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but I hope it helped somebody out there who's going through something similar right now. Here's what I learned. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the only way to survive. If this story meant something to you, make sure you're subscribed, drop a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And I want to hear from you. Has your family ever tried to make you feel like you didn't matter? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next silent victory story.